Hello, this is Edith Newmeyer, and I'm the author of the book, The Mystery of Adam. Today I'm going to continue my last video that I did, which I did on the Great Tribulation, and I'm going to go into more detail about the Antichrist. Now, I have started, just describing and kind of clarifying what the Great Tribulation is, and kind of exposing the deception, these false doctrines that have been started a long time ago and are just flourishing today. It's like almost they're immensely just flourishing. So since you cannot separate the Antichrist from the tribulation, because it's kind of one doctrine, the tribulation was started in order to ban, in a sense, the Antichrist or retain him in this 7-year Great Tribulation. So people will not look who that Antichrist really is. In my last video, I talked a little bit about that, but I just really want to look at that concept of Antichrist today. And because that word is really wrong, and people don't realize how wrong that word is, and really where did it come from, and why in the world are all of a sudden we are all talking about this Antichrist, at the end. Now, the one who brought this up with the Antichrist, of course, wasn't of course, but the one that brought up the Antichrist, this word Antichrist, was John in 1st and 2nd John. I'm going to look first at 1st John 2, where John introduced this word. And really think about how he introduced that word, because that's very important. Because in Revelation, John does not talk about the Antichrist, or does not use that word Antichrist again. Okay? He uses a different word to describe this ruler that would come after the Roman Empire. Because remember Daniel, this statue in Daniel with the head of gold, and then there's the bronze and all these metals. That is, of course, describing every empire starting with Daniel. So there's the Persian Empire, there is the Greek Empire, Babylonian Empire, Greek, Roman, and then out of the Roman Empire comes, or is actually almost looks like it's part of the Roman Empire, and that is the end. Okay, and on that last part of that Roman Empire, which was mixed of clay and iron, is the rock will fall, which is of course Jesus Christ, and will smother it and hit it to smithereens. But make no mistake, there is no gap in between. One empire leads to the next empire. There is no vacuum. The same thing with the Roman Empire flows into this last empire, or this last system. Okay? So this is something you need to keep in mind from the beginning. There is no gap. There is one empire flowing in the next. Babylonian, Persian, Greek, Roman, no gap in between. They're all flowing into each other. And then, of course, out of this Roman Empire came, of course, Papacy. So, now let's look at John 1, 1 John number 2. This is how he describes the Antichrist, or as he calls the Antichrist spirit. Let's see where we're going to start. I need to find where that is. And now I lost it. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's in the next. Maybe it's in the next chapter. But and I got all these things open right now. That oh yeah, okay. Actually, don't. It's Revelation. Ha. Well, I think I'm gonna pause and find it before I. All right, here it is. It's in, starting with verse, it is actually in chapter 2 of John 1. Dear children, verse 18, dear children, this is the last hour. And yes, you have heard that the Antichrist is coming. Even now, many Antichrists have come. So he's talking about this Antichrist that is coming. He says we're living in the last hour. So he believes we're very close to the end. And that was his belief. Okay? Now, I don't think he realized that this last hour would last for 2,000 years. But that's what they believed during that time, that Jesus Christ will return during their lifetime. So he says, and as you have heard that the Antichrist is coming, even now many Antichrists have come. Okay? So he's already saying that many Antichrists have come. Okay, so there is this, that's why we're calling it the Antichrist spirit. But he is waiting for this specific Antichrist. Okay? This is how we know it is the last hour. They went out from us, but they did not really belong to us. For if they had belonged to us, they would have remained with us. But their going showed that none of them belonged to us. So he's talking about many antichrists here that originated in the church. Okay? Some people want to say, oh, the Antichrist comes from the Muslims, or the Antichrist comes from the Jews. This is not what John is saying. John is saying that the Antichrist comes from the Christian faith. Okay? It comes out of the Christian faith. Okay? So it's not something, yes, Muslims are Antichrist. Absolutely. They reject Christ. Yes, Judaism rejects Christ. And they would be considered, of course, Antichrist. But he is talking specifically about people that came out of the church. Okay? And those were considered many antichrists. And now he is waiting for this ultimate, antichrist. But again, when we see, this is John's letter, okay, that was written way before his revelation. When you get to the revelation, he does not use that word antichrist anymore. He uses a different thing. He uses the beast out of the sea to describe who this ruler, this, if you want to say, end times ruler. Now, again, remember, end times ruler for John did not mean 2,000 years later. For John, that means imminent. Okay? So let's continue. So this Antichrist comes out of the church, but you have an anointing from the Holy One. Remember that. You have an anointing from the Holy One. Why is that important? Because you should know the Holy Spirit should guide you. And all of you know the truth. I do not write to you because you do not know the truth, but because you know it, and because no lie comes from the truth. Who is the liar? It is whosoever denies Jesus is the Christ. Such a person is the Antichrist. So such a person is the Antichrist. That's what he's saying. Anybody who denies Jesus as the Christ is the Antichrist. Denying the Father and the Son. No one who denies the Son has the Father. Whosoever acknowledges the Son has the Father also. Do you understand this? Okay, so he's talking about many antichrists that are going to come. He's not talking, he has something in mind that there may be this one antichrist, but he is always talking about antichrists. Everybody who is denying the Son, who is denying Jesus as the Christ, is an antichrist. Okay, so John sees this understanding of what an antichrist is very, very differently. He doesn't specifically describe this antichrist as this one world ruler at the end. Never does he do that. Then John, of course, when he goes and has this revelation from God, he describes a ruler, okay, that comes out of the sea. And that's what most people consider this end time ruler. Even though this beast system out of the sea, a beast is never a single ruler. A beast is always more than one ruler. So in other words, this end times ruler is a system. It's an empire, like the Roman Empire. Every one of the beasts that we see in Daniel are empires. So, and it has many rulers. And so is this beast out of the sea. The beast out of the sea has many rulers. And it just makes one system and one, if you want to call it empire, you can. But it is more like a world system. Okay? So now, this end time ruler that is supposed to come, again, like I said in Daniel, is coming straight out of that Roman Empire. So when you watch my last video, you can understand how this happened. That papacy came straight out of the Roman Empire. It was almost like the papacy tried to keep the Roman Empire alive for many thousands of years through these European emperors. They were always called the Holy Roman Empire. I think the last empire that went down that had that title, Holy, it was actually the German Kaiser. The German Kaiser had that title, Holy Roman Empire. At least that's what even Hitler wanted to revive, is this Holy Roman, Holy Roman Empire. Because that's what Europe was. And the Pope gave them the power. Okay? The Pope gave this whole Holy Roman Empire the power. So, now let's look who this is, this empire that comes out of the Roman Empire. And that is exactly what, for instance, Daniel describes as the little horn. Okay? So if you look at that, and I think that's in Daniel 7, you can see that there's going to be a little horn coming out of this many horns and out of this beast. And then there's this little horn coming out, and which is this final kind of empire. And in Daniel 11, we have a very clear description or a timeline of all the kings and rulers from the time of Darius the Mede. Darius the Mede was he Babylonian? Or was he also already Persian? I remember. I think he was Persian at the time. So there was the Persian Empire, and I think Darius the Mede was from the Persian Empire. Now then I tell you the truth. 3 more kings will arise in Persia. So that was the Persian Empire with Darius the Mede. Okay? Then, after that, and I'm reading now in Daniel 11, then the Greek will come. Okay? So the Babylonians were before the Persian. And then there were the Greek. And then there were the Romans. Okay? And you see that clearly written. He is mentioning the Greek in here. He will stir up everyone against the kingdom of Greece. Then a mighty king will arise, which is Alexander the Great, and Alexander the Great will take over the world. And after him, the empire will be broken into 4 pieces. Okay, 4 pieces. That's historical. And then we can continue. The king of the south will become strong, and you need to just read everything. And then there goes, of course, the king of the south could be actually Egypt, but Egypt didn't last very long. Then that went into, of course, the Roman Empire, taking over. And the Roman Empire, took over for the longest time. If you see the description, you can go all the way to 31. It says his armed forces will rise up to desecrate the temple fortress and will abolish the daily sacrifice. This is about still his armed forces. This is still talking about the Roman army. Because this is still talking about what? The Roman Empire. Because he described a lot about the Roman Empire. And so they will rise up and desecrate the temple fortress and will abolish the daily sacrifice. Then will they set up the abomination that causes desolation. Okay? 31 is not about something that will happen in the future with a 3rd temple. 31 is clearly still describing the Roman Empire. Okay? The Roman Empire. Matter of fact, you can continue. This is just kind of give you a reference point. Daniel gives a reference point that now we can go back to Daniel, what was it? Daniel 9, where he also talks about the destruction of the temple. See, this happened during the Roman time. So that Roman Empire will continue until 33. And we go in then, 35, and then we will go into 36, which talks about a king will do as he pleases. Okay? He will exalt and magnify himself above every god and will say unheard of things against the God of gods. Now we are at that king that people want to call the Antichrist, or which John in Revelation, where was it? Revelation 13 calls the beast out of the sea. Okay? This is the same person. Beast out of the sea, and Daniel's king who will do as he pleases. This king is also described as the son of lawlessness. Paul used that word, and I believe Daniel also described him as the son of lawlessness in another place. So this is the king who does as he will exalt and magnify himself above every god and will say unheard things against God of gods. He will be successful until the time of the wrath is completed. For what has been determined must take place. So this guy is going to be around until the wrath of God. Until the wrath is complete. In other words, until God has poured out his wrath at the end, which again I have talked about in my last video, which will happen, the wrath of God will happen after the tribulation of the saints is completed. He will show no regard for the gods of his ancestors, or for the one desired by women. This sometimes is translated also as he doesn't show the desire for women. Okay, which makes sense, right? I mean, the popes and the bishops and the priests, do they show a desire for women? No. I mean, maybe behind the scene, but in the front, no. They are supposed to be not having the desire for women. Nor will he regard any god, but will exalt himself above them all. Okay? How did the Pope exalt himself above everything? I have already said that in my previous video. He put himself in there as the vicar of Christ. He is a mediator between God and human beings. Matter of fact, he goes as far as saying that he can forgive sin. That only can apply to God. Only. Okay? So he exalted himself to be even God himself. He claims to be able to make all the decisions for all human beings. Okay? So that's what is happening here. God known to his ancestors, he will honor with gold, silver, with precious stones, and costly gifts. So what is this? Instead of them, he will honor a God of fortresses, a God unknown to his ancestors. He will honor with gold and silver, with precious stones, and costly gifts. I wonder, what that means. I don't know what, it's something with, of course, the Pope. What is he honoring? Okay? He's building, of course, this whole system on gold and silver and precious stones and cathedrals and fortresses. If a cathedral is not a fortress, I don't know what is. And everything is decked out with gold and silver and costly things. Okay. He will attack the mightiest fortress with the help of a foreign god and will greatly honor those who acknowledge him. Okay? He will greatly honor those who acknowledge him. Okay? That's exactly what happened. Those who honored him, they got wealth, they got fortune, they got power. He will make them ruler over many people and will distribute the land at a price. What did I tell you? The popes gave away the lands. The lands really did not belong to the rulers of Europe. They got the lands, or they could keep the lands, because they were bowing down to the Pope. And that's why they were crowned emperor or ruler, because they bowed down to the Pope and they acknowledged the Pope as the mediator between them and God. Okay, this is very clear right here. Okay, this ends now, 39 ends now with, well, actually it doesn't end, but it ends the description of this end time ruler, which is not just one person. It's a system that took a long time to get to power. He used the rulers and the warriors of Europe to do his bidding. He sent out the emperors or the people, like for instance, he sent out Columbus and all the people that went out to discover new lands. The Pope was behind all that. He sent his people along, his Jesuits and his monks along, because when they went in The Roman Catholic Church was right there establishing their church. Okay? You need to study history to understand that. I know we've been removed from that for a long time, but I grew up in Germany and I know this history. I grew up even Catholic, so I know this history very well. So then he continues in 40. See, this is now describing this ruler that came right after the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire ended with verse 35. Okay? Ended with 35. And then 36 is where this papacy started. Okay? You know, some people think that the Muslims have something to do with Babylon the Great or the Antichrist. No. The Muslims did not have that much power. Not at all. They did not have world power at all. After, even as the Ottoman Empire did not have world power, it was always, the Pope that had the world power. So then in 40, it tells you that at the time of the end, the king of the south will engage him in a battle, and the king of the north will storm out against him with chariots and cavalry and a great fleet of ships, and he will invade many countries and sweep through them like a flood. Now, who is he talking about here? The king of the south, again, I believe those are the Muslims. Okay? I believe those are the Muslims. At the time of the end, so closer to the end, of course, the Muslims will sweep through Europe. And it looked like, they had to be scared because they were already close to Vienna. And so, yeah, it was, they almost took over Europe, but they were sent back. They were defeated, and they did not, take over Papacy. They didn't take out Papacy at all, and they did not take over Europe. You see, Europe is part also, of course, of that beast system. The beast, and sometimes I even think like maybe the beast system is actually the European countries, and with the whore on top is Papacy, because Papacy ruled them all. Okay, so maybe this whore on top could say that this is Papacy, where the beast is more the European countries that were part of that Roman Empire. Okay, you have room to put your own stuff in there, and please put your comments on the bottom what you think about this. It's very possible that this beast is the European countries that at one time they were destroyed, but it's more like they're just part of that whole beast system, that whole empire, in a sense, with Papacy ruling them all and guiding them. Okay, and so if you see that later on as well, in Revelation, when you read about this beast system, you see how these things were kind of intermingled. So again, and then there's a king of the north will storm out against him. Okay, who could that be? I was thinking that could be maybe Napoleon, when Napoleon actually conquered the Pope and tried to destroy him, took him off his ruling throne, and almost destroyed him. But of course, Papacy came back. They got their land back at the Vatican. So his rule kind of, and I'm thinking about maybe the head wound that was described. One of his heads was wounded, and I think that's in Revelation. So And then, of course, it continues. If you continue to read all this, what will happen, it says, he will gain control of the treasuries of gold and silver and all the riches of Egypt with the Libyans and Cushites, again, in submission. So you're seeing somebody is taking over at the end all these countries, Libya, Cushites, you know what's really going on today, and he will pitch his royal tent between the seas at the beautiful holy mountain, yet he will come to his end and no one will help him. I don't know if that has to do again with England, because England went against, with the help of America, went against, Egypt. England went against Egypt and destroyed the Ottoman Empire with the help of America. Okay, could that be the king of the north that is coming or part of, doing this whole thing? I mean, we don't have too many details here. And then he will pitch his royal tent between the seas and the beautiful holy mountain, yet he will come to his end and no one will help him. Okay, and then of course it continues in 12. It's not over. The end is not over. Let me see, I've got that one. Because that's not it. And then, of course, in 12 says, at that time, Michael the great prince who protects your people will arise. There will be a time of distress, such as not happened from the beginning of nations until then. There is a time of distress. What is he talking about? I believe right here he is talking about the wrath of God. A distress for the people, or Jacob's trouble. It's also called Jacob's trouble. I believe Michael is very much associated with that wrath. Once Michael comes, the wrath of God is coming. So I believe here in 12, it's going into the wrath of God and the destruction, of course, of this beast system. Okay, so read this, because I think in 12, that's the wrath of God starting. So anyways, you have a lot of information right there. Now the next thing that we need to be looking at, of course, is the beast out of the sea. Because the beast, when you read about the beast out of the sea and the whore and the Babylon the Great, they all tie in exactly with this this king that was described in Daniel. Same description. You look at the beast out of the sea, it's the same, very similar description. It says here in Revelation 13:5, the beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies and to exercise its authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to blaspheme God, to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. It was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them. Now, who are the God's holy people? Those holy people, those are the saints. Okay, that's not Israel. It's the holy people is the saints. And it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. It was given authority over every tribe, language, and nation. Muslims were not giving authority over all people, language, and nations. It was the Catholic Church at one point had authority over everybody on this earth. Okay? Really. Bottom line. It wasn't the Muslims. It wasn't the Jews. It was papacy. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all whose name has not been written in the Lamb's book of life, the Lamb who was slain from the creation of the world. Now, we all indirectly worship that beast, not, directly, but indirectly. We all worship that beast. Everybody who is not written in the book of life. Okay? So, Read that again, and also, of course, read the description of Babylon the Great, because my time is up, so I don't want to go into more detail. I'm already over quite a lot. There's so much more to say about this, and I may have to make just another video. But read all these things, and don't be deceived by false teachers. They cannot stand on anything they're teaching. They cannot stand on it, because there is no biblical backup that this, number one, great tribulation, 7-year or 3.5-year tribulation exists, and there is no backup that shows that during that great tribulation, this Antichrist, which is really a muddled term anyways, or very muddled. Okay, hopefully you can see it now, as I pointed out, that it has, I mean, it's, people use it, okay, people use it all the time, and they come up with all kinds of wild things. Oh, the Antichrist. Did you know that the Antichrist, and see, that's another one, the Antichrist is actually not even giving that mark of the beast. It is the prophets, the false prophet. And maybe that is what I need to be talking about in my next video, the false prophet. Because see, that false prophet is probably more relevant during our time than the Antichrist. Okay? He is more relevant for our times today than this beast out of the sea. The beast out of the sea is still here, and it's still there in the background, probably orchestrating everything. But the forefront today is the false prophet. And make no mistake, the false prophet is already here. It's already here. Okay? He's already preparing. He has already done a lot of his signs and wonders. So, but I will talk about that in my next video. Please let the Holy Spirit guide you. This is very important, that we are not deceived, that we know what's going on, that we are ready for our bridegroom when he returns.